roughly about 10 years ago. In 2021, we're going to be celebrating the 10th anniversary. And we have a portfolio of different activities, and we hope some of these, maybe all of them, are of interest to you. We have a journal called the Journal of Organizational Design, which is an open access journal, can be read online, and is the flagship journal for this field and is the defining signature publication, if you like, of the ODC community. We have an annual conference, which in 2021 will most likely be virtual and is going to be on the themes of platforms and meta organizations, how to design them. Is being led by Professors Gurnita Vasudeva from Minnesota and Toby Kretschmer from LMU. We have the webinar series of which today's event is a part. We also have teaching resources, which include things like cases, books, slides, but also access to a network of potential guest speakers for your teaching. We have a certification program where we partner with the European Organizational Design Forum and the Organizational Design Forum to certify organizational design professionals. And finally, we have a podcast series. So we had a very recent completion of a successful series on making remote work, which is run by ODC member Yulia Estrade. And she's about to launch the new podcast series, which is about organizational resilience. So what do we do to build organizations that are resilient to the next big shock, which may not be a pandemic at all, might be something completely different. But what would we do to prepare our organizations for these? So that's the portfolio of activities. If you're not already a member, I would strongly urge you to consider becoming one. We're looking for people who are pushing ideas ahead in this world, whether they are academics or practitioners. We don't care, we're open to all. And we are very open to the kinds of research interests and methodologies people might have. So please do consider joining ODC. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our host for the evening, which is Jaclyn. Jaclyn, thank you so much for taking the time to spend it talking us through this webinar on how one goes about actually scoping out an organizational design project. And I requested her to do this because it's exactly the kind of instruction I wish I had 10 years ago. Because when I was first starting to collect data from my field interactions with managers, I often struggled to understand what's a good way to enthuse them about my trying to solve a problem of use to them, while also learning something from the data we gathered. And it's really a scoping problem, and I don't think I really knew how to do it. I sort of learned by trial and error, more error than trial. But hopefully Jaclyn will save you that by giving you a very quick introduction to this potentially complex problem. Thank you, Jaclyn. Over to you.
Sure. So let me just take sharing rights. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right, well, thank you guys all for joining, whether it's the morning, the afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And thank you, Fanish, for the introduction. So today I will talk about scoping an org design project. So here's just our agenda. I'll go through a little intro, give you a background on Cates Kessler, our firm, some key frameworks that we use that underlie all of our work, our design approach, which is really getting into the scoping of an org design project, our org assessment tips and tricks that we use in our own practice, and then we'll do a few quick practical examples where you guys will get a chance to practice, get a little bio break, and also then work as a group to discuss some assessment, a real assessment example that we'll work on. All right, so Cates Kessler, here's typically where we've played in a large scale transformation. So we were a boutique firm, only about 12 people, doing org design, and we were recently acquired by, but we still play in this very niche area of a large scale transformation. So often we come in after strategy. Bain, BCG, McKinsey is in doing deep strategy work, figuring out, what's the competitive landscape? How are we going to play? How are we going to win? And then our clients call us and say, great, we have this incredible strategy, but how are we going to activate this? How are we actually going to make this work? And so we help our clients with operating model definition and alignment, enterprise org structure, business unit design, function architecture, and then of course, activation of that model. we typically leave our clients in a place where we've helped them set up an organization transformation office, so they have the necessary governance to be able to then implement the design decisions that they've made, as well as do more of the technology and operations implementation kinds of things, more detailed design around headcount analytics and so on. So here's why our clients come to us. The 5 big kinds of questions that they ask us. So the first one is executing a new business model or a major shift in strategy. So things like we want to integrate our customer solutions more effectively, right? We're going from multiple products to more integrated solutions. We're changing to a more omni-channel marketing or e-commerce strategy. Or this is a big one, global business. So we've been a domestic company primarily for the last 15 years, and we're growing rapidly in Europe and Asia, and we need to figure out organizationally, how do we set that up to make that all work? And then on the right side here are just the examples of clients that we've supported in this space. The second one is building new capabilities. Things like we need more customer-focused innovation, or we need to build a digital capability. How should we set that up? Should it be a chief digital officer? Should we have digital capability sitting all over the world as more of a network, or other functional capabilities? So we help our clients in this space as well. The third one is activating a new collaborative operating model, solving matrix challenges. So, thinking back to what I said earlier about coming in after a McKinsey or a BCG, a lot of times our clients have these incredible strategies that they've worked through, but they struggle to kind of bring it to life. And so we help them figure out what's the decision making that needs to be in place? What are the horizontal working connections to make that strategy effective? The fourth one is integrating M&A or standing up a divested business. So we have a lot of clients that are constantly, spinning off parts of their business or, doing acquisitions. How do we make sure we're getting the synergies on the front end of being able to get the most out of those products coming together, or new customer segments, as well as the scale and leverage on the back end, making sure we're not duplicating resources and whatnot. And then the last one, reduce unrewarded complexity. So that's really jargon for we're just too expensive, and we need to figure out where we can be cheaper and where we can repurpose resources for growth where it makes sense, right? How do we make sure we're operating most effectively so we can scale? So after this section, I'll just scan the chat for questions. I know there's a lot of you, so we won't do open Q&A, but I also don't want to, speak at you for an hour. So I think, Finish, does that sound right?
That sounds good.
Okay. So key framework. So the STAR model, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before, Jay Galbraith's STAR model. And although this is a pretty dated model, and we're constantly checking ourselves in our firm to say, is this still relevant? Should we still be using this? And we always come back to this because we feel that it's still the most tested and proven methodology for systems and changing behaviors for organizations. And a quick overview of this is essentially we always start with strategy. How will we grow and compete in our markets? We help our clients make sure they're clear on what are we going after from a strategic standpoint, but more importantly, what aren't we going to focus on? Because if we're not clear on what we won't focus on, we end up with a lot of priorities and not much focus. Once we're clear on strategy, then we can build capabilities. What do we need to be able to do better than our competitors in support of that strategy? And then we say there's really 4 tangible levers that can be adjusted to support that strategy and building those capabilities. And those things are structure, right? How should we organize? What are the key roles? process, what new processes should be put in place, or what processes need to be adjusted based on our strategy. What are the metrics and rewards? How should people be incentivized to deliver on that strategy? And then the last one is people practices, right? What are the talent and performance management practices that we should be building? So one thing to note here is that all of these points, or this model is really holistic. So the star points should all be in alignment. So a quick example is, we often have clients who they have a new strategy where they need to be working more collaboratively in different areas of the business. So they build a new process where different business units and functions come together on some sort of process, and it's a clear laid out process, but incentives don't change. And so unfortunately, the process is great, it's very clear, but because people are still incentivized to work in their old way, they end up not working collaboratively. And so the idea is that all of these points must be in alignment in support of whatever you're trying to achieve for maximum effectiveness. So this slide I always use in my teaching, because when I started doing assessment reports, this was my cheat sheet that I referred back to. And so when levers are misaligned, we see these things happen. So for strategy, if we're not aligned around strategy, then there's often confusion. Priorities aren't clear. The strategies are not producing the results we want. So, we may have a client with a very clear growth objective or operating margin that they want to get to, but they're just not delivering. Structure. If structure and roles are not clear, we end up with the wrong tensions, right? Execution is weak. Decision making is slow. The third one, process. If processes and lateral connections are weak, we see a lot of waste, a lot of wrong work getting done. People aren't collaborating. There's higher costs, long decision cycles. The fourth one, metrics. If metrics and rewards don't support the goals, we end up with a lot of internal competition. People are not focused on. They're trying to get work done. We believe everyone is working really hard to do the right thing, but when you're not incentivized appropriately, it makes that hard, and people are pretty frustrated. And then the last one is people. If we have the wrong people in place, we're going to end up with the wrong skill sets. Legacy players, old behaviors are blocking change, getting a lot of effort without results. So this is our other key framework, and then I won't bore you guys with any more frameworks, but the 5 milestone org design process, this is kind of our how we do the work. And I'm showing this to you because we show this to our clients to help demystify the entire transformation of an organization. This kind of helps it break it down in a simple way to say, these are the key steps we will need to do to get to that end state. So the first one is milestone 1, which is business case and discovery. Is we're really clear on the problem to solve. So this is a diagnostic to make sure that not only as external consultants, we are clear on what we're going to go solve, but we want to make sure that the leadership team, the CEO, the leadership team is aligned on what they're going to go fix. So that's a big part of milestone 1. The second one is once we're really clear on the problem to solve, we can move to strategic grouping. So this is all about structure, making basic structure choices that support the strategy. But unfortunately for structure, although it's very powerful, we say it's a blunt instrument, and every structure creates silos. So in order to bridge those silos of whatever organizational groupings were made, those high-level structural decisions, in order to bridge those different groups together, we use integration mechanisms. And if you think back to the STAR model, those are new key processes, they're new ways of incentivizing people, they're people practices, ways that we can sort of integrate those groups together. And then the fourth milestone is is really, okay, we have this organization that is designed. What's the right talent now? How are we going to staff this appropriately? Because as elegant as an organization is, as sound of organization model as we could help build, if we don't get the right people in place, it's kind of for naught. And then the last one is transitioning. This is really about activating that model, transition planning, getting butts in seats and making big changes. And today we're going to focus on this first part, which is the business case and discovery, the assessment of how we do milestone 1 of the work. Okay, I'll pause there. Let me see. I don't know if I can see the questions. I don't know, maybe Fanish, if you want to pick good questions that maybe I can respond to, maybe that would be a better way to do it. What do you think?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So there are a couple of questions that already came up. One of them has to do with how do you include the family dimension in measuring organizational misalignment? So I guess the question is about family-owned businesses.
Oh, interesting. So we don't, because we work with much larger organizations, I think this is less of an issue, but I can tell you that from we do work with a lot of companies that have founder CEOs, which I think in a way, is similar. And we find that with founder CEOs, there's a lot of decision making that doesn't get pushed down. So that's often a really big challenge that we work through with our clients.
And maybe I can just ask Ashley to ask her question. So Ashley, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hey there. You talked a little bit in Milestone 1. I know you're going to get into that now, but talking a little bit about what the assessment looks like. So is that are those leadership interviews? Are those skills assessment? How does that look to you?
Yeah. So we really, I won't get into it too much because I'm going to talk about it in a second, but essentially the way we do our work, it's very qualitative. We do a set of interviews that we try and, we always interview the CEO, the leadership team, their plus ones typically. We want to get a broad perspective on what's happening in the organization. Depending on what we hear at those top, 1 to 2 layers, we may dig deeper if we feel like we're not getting the information we need to get a full picture. But that's typically the process we would use.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Anne, please go ahead.
Sorry, what was that?
Anne?
Okay.
Anne Green had a question about translating Milestone 2.
Yeah, thanks, Fanish. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you're calling on me. Hey, Jaclyn.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm thinking about if you just maybe could go back just one slide, would you mind? Just your milestone 2 there. So you talked about the basic building blocks of organization. So, are you going divisional, category, product, whatever, I guess those decisions could be. What about when you're doing kind of divisional design, so not dealing with the whole organization? And so those decisions have already been made, but you're really looking now at a particular division. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it would be the same process. Of course, we're always, if it's a part of a bigger enterprise, we want to make sure that we're designing within the context of the enterprise decisions that have already been made. But it would be the same idea. So as an example, if we were redesigning a finance function, we would work with the CFO to say, what's the best way to organize in support of the business? So if it's a product company, are we going to have, finance business partners in support of those products? So whatever group is being redesigned, it would be the same exact process.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I think Matthew had a comment, which is really more of an observation, saying this is fairly traditional design stuff. Is there anything different when called upon to do ecosystem design or business model design? Is that outside the purview or is that very similar?
Sorry, the question is there...
So would it be different if you're talking about ecosystem design or business model design or operating model design? Is that different?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not business model design. I mean, it's truly org organization design. That's all we do. We don't do changes in business model. We work with our clients after they've changed their business model to reorg their company, but we're not. We don't help our clients think, okay, we want to move from a retail to a wholesale to a retail strategy. That's just not our expertise. I'm thinking, Fanish, maybe I keep going and then we do questions after the next section. Good. Okay, so design approach. So this, I won't spend too much time here, but just so you guys kind of have context, this is how we would do an enterprise-wide initiative, or to your point, Anne, the same process would occur for one unit being reworked as well. So the first phase is this setting the operating model for the enterprise, or again, setting the operating model for that unit. This would really be the assessment, what's the problem to solve, and then making sure that those leaders are all aligned on the case for change, high-level operating model changes. Phase 2 would be more of that design work we talked about. So basic structure architecture, building out leadership teams for the specific units of the company, building, in those lateral integrators to enable faster, more agile ways of working. And then phase 3 really varies. And our support in this area, again, varies a lot. We do everything from, just helping our clients kind of set up their transformation office to manage the rest of the process. We sometimes support them light touch on staffing or activation over time, maybe coaching in the background. And today we'll focus again on this first 2 months of our process. So this, and Anne, I paused on your question because I think this will maybe answer it a bit more as well. So I think, what differentiates how we do this work versus where the way I did it previously, part of a bigger consulting firm, is that we really believe that for an organization design to be most effective, it should include a high engagement of leaders throughout the design process. And so each phase of the process, we are adding more voices, we're making sure we're including people. We find that when we do that, the organization design, when it comes time for implementation and activation and why our clients are happy is because it actually sticks. People feel good about the process. They feel like they had their hands on it. And I think part of it is that we do not pretend to be experts in any of these company products. So as an example, I recently worked with a robotics, high-tech robotics medical device company. The leadership team had been there for 15, 20 years. They're all experts in their products. We're watching YouTube videos on what their products are. So we're bringing to them, we're bringing great org design process. We're bringing examples from other industries for how to do a really strong org design, but we need their voices in all of the design work to make sure they're getting the most appropriate design for themselves. So in this first part here, which I'll talk about again today, is really, executive team. We're doing interviews of the top people. As you move to the exec alignment, we're bringing the leadership team back together, modeling new ways of working in the way they want for their future design. The design charrette, it's just a fun word we use, which essentially means a 2-day creative session where we're bringing together a lot of people in the organization, usually bringing back the interviewees, as well as some other system representatives, subject matter experts that we think are really important to create the most effective design, and then so on. The design work, transition planning, we're just constantly including a huge group of people from the organization. I'll pause there. Any questions on that? I think I tend to get a lot of questions in that area. Did anything come up in the chat? I can't see it.
Some of these were around scope questions, but I think your comment has made it clear what is in and what is not in scope. But okay, in case anybody wants to jump in and maybe ask something, so I see something from Alvaro Triana, I see something from Ibrahim Rashid, and Vinny. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure.
Maybe I can ask a question, Jaclyn. One of the initial discussions come always when you're working with senior leaders and people below is external perspective. And that's where it becomes a little bit of a purchase point where either you get some data from big consulting firms or you have your own network where you get that kind of a data. What is the best practice here? How do you really maneuver that discussion? Because one, you are always careful that you don't want to color the picture already, because your reality might be very different from outside. And how do you really manage that level of excitement among the leaders to see what's happening out there?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think most of our clients are anxious to hear what's happening externally. You know, we're very careful to advise them not to copy any model, and every organization has its own nuances. I think we do bring in external data as much as we can in support of the design decisions. But we have a belief that, and why we do the work this way is that we believe that the answers exist in the organization, that across the top, 70 people that we're interviewing, that they have a good idea of how they should be organized. So as much as we want to bring in external perspective and give just more data for people to be able to make good decisions, we believe that through our interview process, through the design process, we will get the most effective design. Other questions?
Yes, Jaclyn. My name is Alvaro Triana. My question was, where and when do you include corporate governance adjustments in the organizational design scoping?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's in the assessment phase. We definitely governance, changes to governance comes up all the time when we redesign the organization, especially big changes. There needs to be governance changes. So that would be part of the design work, that we would work with the leadership team to figure out, what are the adjustments to how this all works. Yeah, good question.
There are a couple more that maybe I can summarize quickly. One is, how often should organizations redesign? And the other is, what fraction of top management time should be spent on design projects?
Good questions. The how often question, I don't, that's a tough one. I think we sometimes have clients who have never done a redesign ever. And, it's been 30 years, they've been operating, wonderfully. But then we also have clients who I feel like are constantly redesigning and changing. I think if this work is done properly, it shouldn't be a constant redesign. I think when companies run into that, it's because they've designed pieces and parts of the organization and they haven't looked at it from an enterprise perspective. Or another example is working with like a holding company where there's some integration across those companies, and one group gets redesigned, and then it creates upward pressure to think about, okay, where else can we get leverage on the back end across these groups? But if we don't start at the top, it can make it really difficult, and we end up, doing a bit of back and forth. But not sure I can give a hard number on how often redesigns should happen.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we should keep going.
Okay, so getting into the assessment and how we do this, what are our tips and tricks? So the purpose of a diagnostic report is really getting to the problem to solve, but it's also setting up the design work for success, as I discussed before, to make sure that that design sticks. So the first one here, really understanding the current state. What's the baseline? Where are we today? What's the gap between where we are today and where we want to go? The second one is determining the root causes of why those gaps exist so that we can make the highest impact changes. So our CEOs and leadership teams that come to us are really smart. They know typically that what the issues are in their organization. I think where we bring value is making sure we're getting to the proper root cause of why things are happening. So that way, when it comes time to redesigning, they're the most informed that they can be. The third one is surfacing good ideas and opportunities. So through our interviews, we're really looking for the problem to solve. But of course, while we're doing interviews, we get a lot of, hey, I think this would be a really good idea for the future. Here's a recommendation. So we want to make sure we're capturing all those thoughts so that when it comes time to design, they're not starting from scratch. The fourth one is engaging employees in the project. So thinking back to that participative approach, we want to make sure there's a co-design, people are involved, just to help the design stick and make sure we're getting the best ideas. The fifth one is uncovering potential areas of resistance or implementation obstacles. So, it's not uncommon for us to have a few interviewees just not be on board with the change, or this is really sensitive work. Maybe they're really nervous about their own position getting eliminated or their own role changing. So we want to make sure, although everything is confidential, we don't want to expose anyone. We still want to understand where are there areas of resistance, and our remedy for that is let's bring these people in the fold. Let's make them part of the process. They may not agree with the outcome, but at least they understood how the group kind of got to that choice. And then the last one is just we believe in creating an open and transparent process, reducing rumors. In my old role where I did this kind of work, it was extremely outside in, and I think our clients felt much more like they were having something happen to them versus them kind of designing their own organization. So our belief is let's be open, let's be transparent, reduce as many rumors as possible to the extent we can. So our diagnostic generally follows this six-step process. The first one is intaking of the problem. This is really the view of typically the CEO or the leader of whatever group is being redesigned. What are their hypotheses? What questions do they want answered? Two is reviewing all the documentation that we can, financials, org charts, strategy documents, customer feedback, whatever they have that could potentially impact the design. We want to make sure we're completely up to speed before we start doing any interviews. The third one is developing questions. So we'll work with the few key leaders to make sure we are developing the right questions to ask the organization so that we make sure we're getting, really getting the right information that we're going to need. The fourth one is those interviews I talked about. So we want to make sure are the leaders clear on the strategy? Are they aligned on the direction? Are they aligned on what problems need to be solved? What kind of still needs to be discussed after interviews? And then this step 5 here and 6 we do them sometimes depending on what problems we need to solve. So focus groups, we may conduct focus groups if there's really a lot of voices that need to be heard, but all those people maybe don't want to be heard individually, or we feel like it would benefit people to be together so that they can bounce ideas off of each other and kind of build on their thinking. And yeah, again, employee focus group survey, same idea there. I saw some questions pop up. Maybe I could just answer those since we're running on time.
So there's actually one of my own, if I may, before I open it up.
Oh, sure.
Which is the, if you think about the scope of the problem, literally in terms of which parts of the organization do you have a remit for in terms of design? So is the client shaping that for you, or is that something you discover through your interviews that, in fact, you might have to go broader than the client thought or go narrower than the client thought? Could you speak a little bit to how you bound the context?
Absolutely. So I would say it's both. I think when we begin, we have a remit from typically the CEO on this is what we want to solve. I would say most of the time it's right in terms of scope, but it's also not uncommon for us to go in, do interviews, and say, oh wow, we're actually not getting all the data we need. We weren't told that we didn't think that we were going to have an issue around digital, and We interviewed some IT people, but you know what, we need to go deeper because a lot of interviewees have brought this up as something that needs to be redesigned. It may not have been apparent to the leadership team because they're sitting at a certain level. So I would say scope, we start with the scope, but it often changes.
Okay. I'm going to compress a couple of the questions here in the interest of time.
Sure.
People are asking about how do you balance opposing views about what that employees or managers or senior leaders might have. So not everybody will be on the same page, right? And you have to shepherd that process of convergence. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so they're very typical. I would say more common than not. There's usually opposing views in our interviews about what how the organization should be organized, but even problems to solve. You know, some people think certain things are working swimmingly, and others are saying this is terrible. And I think often it's because we interview both people on the business side as well as functions. Sometimes, you know, the functions think we're doing great, we're supporting the business appropriately, and then people on the business side are like, this function support is terrible. We have 5 business partners we need to go to. This is causing us to spend our management time and attention on, you know, dealing with the complexity of our organization versus out in the markets and with our customers. So we capture all of that. We try and represent all the views in our assessment, and then it's helpful for when they actually go and do the design work to have a grounding of, okay, this is how everyone kind of feels about what's going on. Now let's work together to solve it. And I think, you know, people aren't there's not bad intentions. They just often don't have the visibility to other parts of the organization to understand kind of this is what's happening and going wrong. So that's, I think, where we can be really helpful in consolidating those viewpoints into something that can be digestible for everyone to go and then act and change.
Somewhat related to that, Anne raises a question about, have you had to do an under the radar exercise where it's not widely known in the company that you've been called in to contemplate a major change? Is that normal, or is that?
I think we our values of our firm, I think we try and stay away from that because we do believe in a transparent, open process. However, we do sometimes our clients just don't like consulting firms, and we're okay with that. We understand that. So we will coach them in the background. We often coach, you know, another big part of our work is we do a lot of teaching and coaching of internal OD, HR teams so that they can go and do redesign in their own organization. And we love that. We love teaching, and we love, you know, supporting clients to be able to do this work themselves.
Okay, I think there are a couple of more detailed questions. Maybe we can come back to them after you've made some progress.
Okay.
Maybe I can just ask a quick question, Panish, on this slide.
Sure.
Jaclyn, a quick reply, if you can give, on how do you diagnose strategy?
Good question. So we, in the way we test for strategy, I guess it's important to note, we do not evaluate the quality of strategies. So we don't care about what models are used for strategy. We're not evaluating how strong the strategy is. What we're really listening for and checking for in strategy is, are people aligned on some of those more detailed strategy decisions? So we often have clients who are very aligned on their profit goals, their, you know, revenue goals, their operating margin goals. But when we start asking about, okay, you know, what customers are you going after? What products are you focusing on? What's your channel strategy? We get diverging perspectives. We get varying viewpoints. And so what ends up happening is what we realize is there's not really clear criteria and decision-making guidelines for leaders to make decisions around those key strategy choices. And so even though the leadership team may be clear on, we've made these decisions, right? We have them all in documents. Maybe they haven't been communicated, or maybe they just really need some refinement so that these leaders can go and act on those strategy choices. So that's really what we're listening for and evaluating. That's a really good question.
Thank you.
All right, I'll keep going. Okay, so this is, again, I know you guys assume you'll be able to get these slides. This is kind of another cheat sheet. The biggest thing really to watch out for when doing assessments is that, again, we're really getting to the root cause of the problem. You know, most leadership teams know what the issues are. They know, they have ideas for how to fix them, right? These presenting requests. So to kind of dive into one example, you know, we'll get a presenting request from a leader saying, you know, we just need to pay our people more. And we try and take a step back and say, okay, what's really happening here? Okay, so you're not able to attract top talent. Makes sense. But but the value that we bring is getting to really the root of that issue. Okay, so we're not able to attract top talent. Is it because there's an ill-defined or unattractive employment brand? Is there a poor selection process? Maybe your talent acquisition team is underperforming. Maybe you have a mismatch in candidate profile, right? You're hiring the wrong kind of people for those roles. So our job is to probe and ask questions and get examples to make sure that when we come back to our client with an assessment, that we're really getting to the roots of what we're hearing. So here's just some tips for conducting effective interviews. First one, determining questions, right, based on a purposeful model. This is all about refining the questions with the key leader. Second one, keep the questions concise. We don't want to, you know, ask paragraph questions. We want to keep it short. We want to make sure we ask open-ended questions. You know, a lot of these are really smart leaders. They're high in their organizations. As I said, they're experts. They're going to have a lot to tell us, and we want to make sure we give them the space and the opportunity, that we're not leading them too much, that they kind of take the conversation where they want it to go. We like to include rating scales. We like to allow the person to give their answers, right? Not be afraid of silence. When I first started doing this, and I think it's a natural instinct of a lot of people, is that when I'm interviewing someone, I want to make them feel really comfortable. And so when there's silence, I like to fill the air just naturally. But it's actually, some of the best information is giving a few pauses and giving that person a chance to think, and letting them fill the silence, and not you as the interviewer. Probing techniques can be really helpful. And something I found here is there's so much jargon that's used in organizations that things mean different things in different places. And so just having people, can you say more about that? Can you give me an example? What else is going on? Those kinds of questions can be really helpful in getting more information. Checking for understanding. So, you know, reiterating what you've heard, especially, you know, we're interviewing people from all over the world, and the way that someone in Japan says something is going to be very different than the way someone from Germany says something, or someone from Silicon Valley. Just want to make sure that we're hearing them correctly and we're not making assumptions about what they're telling us. Then when we finish the interviews, we like to block a little bit of time, just make sure we're taking time to note the experience, you know, as the interviewer. What did I immediately feel in terms of the tone of the interview? If they're a really strong interviewee, we like to kind of identify them to make sure, hey, this is a key person we want to include in the design work. So just making sure to make note of that. Otherwise, you end up doing, you know, 35 interviews and you can't remember who's who, and who was strong, who had good ideas. And then the last one is just summarizing key findings, record any theories, ideas as you go, just to make sure you're not missing information. Again, when you go back to interviews later on, you can often forget things. So just making sure to highlight any key things that are top of mind right after the interview is helpful. I saw a lot of questions come up. Maybe we'll answer one good question, Fanish, and then I'll move on.
So there are actually quite a lot of comments as well, not necessarily.
Oh, good.
But if somebody would like to chime in with a specific focus question for Jaclyn, maybe this is a good time.
Sure.
Okay, while they're mulling that, I actually had one, if you don't mind, which is around the diagnosis part, right? So in your view, how often is it the case that you're really synthesizing a diagnosis of the situation that already exists somewhere in the company, right? That you've just put it together by talking to a bunch of stakeholders, versus you see a pattern that nobody in the company has seen, but you recognize the problem for what it is based on your external knowledge. So do both these things occur, and in what frequency?
Yeah, no, I would say every client we go into, there's, you know, issues, and we are pulling together different issues in different parts of the company, and then we say, okay, this is a theme, this is systemic across the company. Decision making clarity isn't, you know, there's no decision making clarity around these types of decisions. A person in finance is not going to be able to see that it's also happening in HR, and it's also happening in supply chain. And although there are different types of decisions that, you know, we'll need to work through, this is a systemic issue that needs to be solved. So yes, exactly. And that's the value we bring in terms of bringing those thoughts together, but also knowing, you know, we know what to look for because we've seen it so many times. So yes, bringing that external view of, okay, this is common, this is not weird for your organization, and we know this is something to solve, and now we're going to give you an actionable path on how to go about solving it.
So this might be related to Yusuf's question about metrics, and he was asking what are the most common metrics you're using to assess orgs. Is this like a standard checklist? Is it customized by industry, by sector, by company size, or something like that?
So at this point of the process, we don't get into detailed metrics. I think things that we're looking for here are issues around like P&Ls, as an example. You know, we a lot of times have clients who are they're operating pretty separately across their business units, and then they need to become more integrated because their strategy is calling for it, their customers are calling for it, whatever it is. And we are testing for, are P&Ls a barrier to that integration across leaders? Are those metrics kind of creating an environment where leaders are not able to work in the way that would be most effective for the company? But it's not, we're not testing, you know, down detailed metrics. That would be more in a phase 2 design, where we would say, you know, what are the metrics that the supply chain wants to be measuring themselves on, that sort of thing.
Got it. Thank you.
Good.
I see
All
one
right.
more from.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do another one.
So Uzgejan Kochak is asking, are there design problems, gaps that insiders routinely miss? So are there certain things that it's literally the case that you as outsiders immediately spot, but insiders continuously tend to miss?
I would say across all different areas, our clients miss things, but the one about strategy is really interesting. We kind of joke that there's always some strategy refinement work that needs to be done, and it's really common for a leadership team to think that they're extremely clear on strategy. You know, they've done all this hard work, but often it's just not communicated in a way or a detailed enough way that allows leaders to make trade-off choices. And so it's slowing down the organization, or they're overwhelmed with all the priorities because they end up just doing everything instead of, you know, focusing on the high value focus areas of the business. So I would say that's one that is routinely, you know, consistently missed.
Okay. Lack of clarity on communicating the strategy to the organization. Great. Let's keep going.
Okay. So this is really just a summary, right? What isn't an assessment report? What is an assessment report from our view? So what it isn't, it's not the same as the presenting problem, right? It's not what the CEO or leadership team or the leader of that unit told us is the issue. It's a fact-based diagnostic statement where we are getting to the root causes of issues. The second one, it's not just a playback of what we heard. It's an articulated, well-crafted, informed point of view that brings together what we heard in a digestible way, but also puts it into a story that's actionable, that the client can go and act and actually make changes. And the third one is it's not only bad news. You know, sometimes we go into clients, people are really frustrated. We hear a lot of issues, a lot of problems to solve, but every company has strengths to build on, and we don't want to miss that. And we want to make sure that whatever we're designing, we are building on whatever those strengths are that already exist. This is just an example of kind of the different elements of the problem to solve. So the first one is data points, right? We hear things like HR team in Europe is unable to communicate with the HR team in Asia. Leadership teams across geographies are meeting without consulting across other geographies. PMO groups aren't working together. So you get the idea. These are kind of pain points that we hear. And Fanish, I think this goes back to your exact question of there's issues going on all over the organization, but what's really the root cause? What's the whole problem to solve across the whole company? And so we take all of these data points and then we put them into a set of themes or patterns that we're hearing. Themes are, examples would be functions and geographies are not working together. Leaders are setting priorities, optimizing results within their own silos. There aren't clear owners of processes. Maybe decision rights aren't clear. And so what we end up getting to, and we work really hard on our end as a team, we iterate on these assessment reports for days to get to really what is the problem to solve? What is the problem statement, the root cause of all of these issues? And for this one, what we came up with is it's really necessary value generating collaboration is not happening across the company because reliable integration mechanisms aren't in place to bridge those silos. So it was really, there's all these themes that we want to capture to make sure that they go solve, but the systemic root problem to solve is around collaboration. That's kind of the gist there on assessment. So I think, Fanish, I'm going to keep going just because of timing. Does that sound fine? We could do Q&A at the end.
Okay, sounds good.
So I want you guys to just take time on your own to label these. And maybe we'll take, instead of 15 minutes, we'll do 10 minutes. Label these 6 things as either a problem statement, a data point, a strength, or a recommendation. And it seems pretty straightforward, but we get a lot of data from our clients, and this is an exercise that we kind of go through in our own minds about what are our clients telling us, what's really a strength, what's really a data point, what's actually a true problem to solve. So take some time to label each one, as well as a bio break if you need. And we'll come back at 10:05.
So Ruchika, do you want to put us in maybe breakout rooms? Is that possible?
We could, you know what, I don't think it's necessary, to be honest with you. I think, it's just probably better to have people work it, and then we can maybe have a little open discussion, but I think the breakout groups, maybe I have another exercise that might be better for breakout groups, but this one is just a quick one.
Okay, so we just do this on a room.
Yeah. All right, we'll take 30 more seconds and then I'll jump back in.
Can I just check with you, Jaclyn, if it's okay to share your
Jump back in?
slides?
Yeah, sure. Oh, can you guys see my screen now still?
Yeah.
You
I was
can, right?
asking about sharing the slides later with the audience. Is that okay?
Of course, yeah.
Thanks.
So the first one here, although the organization is competing in a dynamic and competitive environment, leaders are optimistic about the growth opportunities. So clearly a strength. Leaders are optimistic about the opportunities for change. So strength. Second one, B, a formal strategic planning process is needed to set a roadmap to guide focus and energy on investments and initiatives. This is clearly a recommendation resolution. So, if we hear this in an interview, we would put that into another bucket to say, okay, here's an idea for the future. Let's make sure that we're capturing. Third one, not going to read it to you, but it encompasses data points, it encompasses themes. So this is really a strong, robust problem statement that we've used in a real assessment report. D, different locations compete for the same business opportunities. Again, data point, pain point. Rapid market expansion and ambitious growth strategies have outpaced the talent management infrastructure, straining the culture. This is a problem statement. We're actually going to work with this one in a second. And then the last one, customer defections have increased in Western Europe markets this year at a rate 2 times the previous year. So that's clearly a data point, a pain point that we would want to include and use that to build a theme. Any quick questions here before we go into the next exercise?
So one of the nice things with this format, Jaclyn, is that people raise questions in the chat and others answer them. So some of these questions are kind of
perfect. Okay. I wish I could see them. I'll look later, but I'll just keep going then. How's that?
Yeah, unless I'm missing something, if I have, please do jump right in. But I think most of the points raised have been resolved.
Okay, so this is the bigger exercise, and I think my objective here is twofold. It's one, it's to show you exactly how we would put together problem statements, themes in support of that problem statement, as well as pulling verbatim comments from the interviews to make sure that we're giving color to our client so that this story is really from the organization and it's not us telling them, these are the issues. So we would basically take verbatim comments, put them in a slide in support of specific themes that would support a problem statement. So I've kind of worked backwards for you guys here. I think the hardest part is identifying the themes. So what I've done is I've pulled 3 themes in support of this problem statement on the top left here. Rapid market expansion and ambitious growth strategies have outpaced the talent management infrastructure and are straining the culture. I pulled an HR example because I assume there's a lot of HR people in the audience. So that is the overarching problem statement. An example theme is that talent development, acquisition, and onboarding platforms are insufficient to support the velocity of headcount growth and safeguard the culture. And these are the verbatims that support that. So I won't read them to you, but if you read them, they really paint the picture of that theme. And so what I'll ask you to do is take a few minutes to read those verbatims, write your own themes, and then I will show you what we came up with and what we included in our assessment report related to this topic. So let's say, I know I want to maybe give a few minutes at the end for questions. So let's do until 10:20. And you guys can write your themes, or actually we'll do till 10:15 and write your themes, and then I will show you what we came up with, and then we can leave the end for questions. So take 5-6 minutes to write your own themes. All right, we'll take one more minute.
While people are doing that, Jaclyn, I had a quick question. Have you guys
Sure.
considered using things like natural language processing or machine learning, algorithmic ways of parsing this text? Because that's what they do as well, right? I mean, you can
Yeah.
apply similar techniques to that.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot, and we've used it before in one of our assessments. And what we found is it's a good first pass, in terms of bucketing things. But I think it also was comforting to know and confirm to us that there's so much that we need to do as org designers, as org design experts, that cannot be that cannot be that cannot happen through a machine. And I've actually looked into a lot of like different types of technologies and AI, and it's really hard to do. It's really hard to bucket quotes like this and the way that in a way that we would need it for clients. Yeah, really good question though. Any other questions while we're waiting? And then we'll do I'll just show you guys the responses, and then I just have Q&A. So okay, I'll go to the answers. So this is what we came up with for these two sets of verbatim comments. So the first one is the internal leadership bench is depleted, and day-to-day workload and reluctance to empower serve as impediments to building the next generation of senior leaders from within. So we see this a lot, right? Talent development, succession planning isn't there. So we want to make sure that, in addition to that sort of high level, we need to develop our people better. What's really happening? Why? And in this case, it was really the workload and the not empowering leaders to kind of develop. The second one, theme C, is that rapid growth coupled with a lack of priority setting is resulting in people spread too thin doing the day job and the 1++ special projects. So we did a lot of interviews where people were just saying, I don't have a second to myself. I'm working around the clock. I'm doing my day job, my night job, and a special project. So this was something we heard about a lot, and so it was a theme. But both of these themes are supportive of the overarching problem statement, which is that this rapid growth has outpaced the talent management infrastructure, and the culture was getting strained. So all of these themes support the overarching problem statement. And as Fanish said, I'll give you these slides so you guys can look at this again in more detail if you so please. So that's all I have for you today. And I want to answer any other questions you have. With that being said, I am happy to talk to any of you offline. I get very enthusiastic, or I get really excited when other people are enthusiastic about org design like me. So that's kind of what energizes me. So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a discussion about any of this. Another topic that's on your mind, really anything, you can just write to me on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk. But in the last 10 minutes, happy to answer any questions you guys have now.
Okay, I guess you should just feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, since we have some time now.
You can ask a question.
Please do.
Hi.
Sure.
Hi, Samina.
Hi, Jaclyn. So I'm curious, Jaclyn, when you're working, some of what you've mentioned is the inability of different groups to work together collaboratively, whatever, like the siloing kind of effect. Do you find that when you're doing your interviews that most of the leaders are more defensive, or kind of reflecting blame on others, or do they also acknowledge kind of what their end of the problem may be? I'm just curious about and how you balance that and trying to get out what they might be contributing to the problem.
Yeah, we definitely get a bit of both. You know, of course, people are defensive, but I think that at the same time, um, people are very introspective, and they are also the first to admit we have an issue in our group, or I could be doing better, in X. And I think part of what's helpful is creating a safe environment for them to tell us what they're really thinking. And so, we always start every interview with, this is not an assessment of you. This is truly an assessment of the organization. We're looking for themes. And everything is confidential, right? We will use verbatim comments, but we'll never allow it to be attributed to or traced back to one person or any small group of people. And I think that gives people the comfort that they can kind of speak openly and be honest about what they really think is going on. Good question. Other questions that I can answer?
Hi,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Sure, yeah, I can.
Hi, this is Rashmi. Well, I just had a question. I mean, in a post-pandemic world, we consume differently, we engage differently, it's all very virtual. So, previously known solutions may not be, relevant in the current times. And, strategy may not be as we've known, for it to be before. I mean, there are no static markets, etc. So from that perspective, if you've consulted post-pandemic from a strategy perspective, what are some, key themes that you've seen now that it's all gone virtual? But equally, have you had to shift gears and look at how you apply strategy differently? It would be good to know, some of the post-pandemic models, how you think, if they have newer models emerging that you see, and just to understand the context from in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think I would have a few comments related to that. I think what's been so much fun for us is because our process is so collaborative, and we do a lot of co-design with our clients, is we're kind of learning with them, and they're experiencing new ways of work that they've just been forced into, right? Emergency collaborative kind of things. And what we're saying is, let's use that. This worked well. Let's use that as a model for how we do other work. And so we're trying to help them identify examples of areas where they've done really well, where things have come out, positive things have come out in the way they're working together, and try and build them into the model so it's actually part of their system in the way that they do work in the future. So I would say that's one thing. In terms of just working more virtually, we've, I think like everyone else, we're finding that there's for sure benefits and drawbacks to being in a virtual environment. But because our clients have typically been, we have leaders who typically sit in different parts of the world. We're finding that it's actually been fine, right? I mean, at least I'm not seeing that. In some ways, our in-person meetings, there's definitely benefits to, getting in a room, and I think that people are just more creative when they're together. But there's also, that travel and that exhaustion. It's kind of nice. We used to have to cram these 2-day design sessions to get 2-day meetings into full-day sessions, and they were really tiring. And now we can kind of do the design work in 3-hour blocks, where people don't have to be so tired, because it doesn't matter if you log on, once a week or once every couple of days to get the work done. I'm trying to think of other thoughts I have around this. We've had so many discussions as a team about, how can we be ahead of what's going on in terms of helping our clients organize more appropriately for a post-pandemic world. And I think we're still developing a lot of thoughts. We put together a piece on diversity and inclusion, around how in a post-pandemic world, people working more virtually, we're seeing examples of, maybe benefits of that. So that's in a blog that we put together. Feel free to check that out. But I think we're still developing in our ideas. So stay tuned on that.
Thank you.
Sure. other questions I can answer in the last few minutes?
There are some questions in the chat.
Maybe I'll just stop sharing because I, for some reason, can't see the chat. Here we go. Now I can see it.
Hey, Jaclyn, this is Amit, and I had a quick question for you. You know,
Yeah.
this is a follow-up to the question that the young lady had before. That is, what is the new reality that we come to post the pandemic, the new norms in certain industries such as retail, banking, and such? What I've observed, and I've written blogs on them, is that there's a significant effort being put into digital transformation and virtualization of self-service, etc. Now, keeping in mind that some of these traditional models were based on being collaborative in the same spot, or having a universal place to work, etc. How does this now translate to the new norms of working and the new ways of doing business? Because business as we knew it, because of the pandemic, is going to change. The global value chains are going to change, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we kind of see the big changes around digital environments and all these, just like it would be any other big change. And so we want to design for whatever that new change is. I don't know if that answers your questions per se, but I think from a collaboration standpoint, we're thinking about if we need to collaborate across certain units in certain ways, what are the forums we need to put in place? Or if a business thrives on spontaneous interactions, right? I mean, I've talked to so many people that are like, we just don't have that conversation in the kitchen or at the coffee maker. So how do we build in and design in opportunities for people to collaborate when in a natural way that they would otherwise do in the office? So maybe it's, conversations with random people across the company, once a week, or and I think what's cool about this and what excites me is that it used to be people that would only be in the same geography. But now you can have people that have these intentional, I want to call them intentional, spontaneous interactions of somebody that's, maybe they're all sitting in the finance organization, but you have someone in Silicon Valley, you have someone in Zurich, right? Or someone in Asia that can kind of get together if the organization designs in those opportunities for them to meet.
I would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have like a couple of other people. I joined later because the original invitation was in a different time zone. So I'm apologies for that. So I don't know if you already discussed this, but it is something that I really run into in my work. And that is that if we understand that organizations are dynamic and complex, that like no matter how good the scoping is beforehand, like there is going to be emergent insights during an organizational design project. And I wonder, like, how do you deal with these emergent insights? Because at least the project that I was involved in now, like it in that sense, like it went horribly wrong because there was not enough understanding of the organization at hand, designing something without really understanding the current organization, and then having a complete mismatch for what you're designing. So how do you keep scoping throughout the project?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think that's part of why we make sure that before we start designing, we're very clear on the problem we're trying to solve. That doesn't mean that as we go through the design process, new issues aren't going to arise. And so as we get into more detailed design, there is, in addition to just more color around what the current state problems are to solve, but also new things emerge. We just want to make sure that as we're designing, we kind of bring all of that into the fold and say, okay, this is an issue. Let's make sure we're solving for that as well. But I think through the collaborative co-design, you solve for some of that versus, that outside in, okay, we have our issue. Now we're all going to go in a back room and fix it and give it back to you. So when you're actually doing it together, I think you can avoid some of that, not to say that you can avoid all of it, but hopefully mitigate some of those, the challenges of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that brings us towards the end. Thank you so much for your time. And I see Amy's here as